Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Wine and Chill. I'm Stephanie, your favorite recovering lawyer, former tech corporate employee, here to talk about one of the banes of my existence, which is diversity, equity, inclusion in tech, as somebody who formerly used to work in DEI. And we're going to have a special guest in like 30 minutes, so I'm super excited. How are all of you doing? And the setup is new. So, with the setup being new, hopefully I get the camera right. I've tested it out a few times on Patreon, so we will see. So happy Tuesday to everyone. Okay, good. It looks like everyone is trickling in, and we'll go ahead and start. All right. So this is going to be our agenda. You know what? Let me make me much smaller because I cannot see that. So a few quick updates. And, we're going to talk about working in tech because I think people have finally, after arguing with me on the Clock app and on Instagram, realize that tech is not this utopia for Black people, particularly for Black women. As a Black woman that worked in tech for the better part of 6 years. So if one thing tech is going to do is raise your blood pressure. So we are going to talk about the incident between Uber's chief diversity officer, their head of diversity, equity, inclusion, and her Karen conference that she decided to throw at everyone else's expense. So we're going to talk about that and why diversity, equity, and inclusion is not working in corporate. Diversity, equity, inclusion without anti-racism work is a waste of time, as I said before. So we're going to talk about that. And then we're going to talk about why POC without solidarity is pointless. And last but not least, we're going to talk about white womanhood and the quest for marginalization. All right. So hey, Nick. Hey, Tori. Hi, Jimmy. Hey, Christine. So let's go ahead and get into it. So a few quick updates and shout outs. I don't know if this slide was supposed to be here or if this was supposed to be, oh, I have this in here twice. Well, good. So if you missed the artificial intelligence video that I dropped last week, go ahead and check it out. Don't worry. It's meant to lower your blood pressure. I'm talking about digital dolazols and the legal and ethical issues of large language models, which is essentially what artificial intelligence is. No, they're not going to take over the world just yet, but the corporations sure are going to continue to exploit people via these methods. So I highly recommend giving that a watch, and I will link it down below in the description as well as the pinned comment as well. And then a huge shout out to my Patreon. We haven't done a live on the channel yet this month. This is the first one. I've been figuring out, to be honest, the new algorithm changes. Full shade to YouTube. Full shade. So I've been on Patreon a little bit more. So if you want to catch everything that's going on, go ahead and head over to Patreon. Also helps support the channel and keeps this creator dream alive. And a lot of you asked, because we talked about it on Instagram, we did a live stream on Patreon only live stream about, the change in content of one of, I would say, my former favorite content creators, and how there is now a growing wave, I would say, of Black YouTubers turning to various brands of conservatism on YouTube, and how Christ conservatism and coins go together. So yes, we did do a live stream on Miss Kelly Stamps and her very interesting second channel that contains a lot of sad, problematic content. Yes, we did. So particularly around internalized anti-Blackness and the never-ending quest for white approval, and why the real villain in a lot of creators' origin story is actually the algorithm that has, I think, pushed her towards this type of content. So if you want to see that deep dive, it is over on Patreon. And then again, because I put it in here twice by accident, go ahead and watch that artificial intelligence video. Okay, so let's get into why you're here. If you work in tech, you have worked in tech, you are a Black girl in tech, you already know. It's one thing that tech is going to do is try your blasted nerve. She does have a second channel, and I wish I had never seen it, to be honest, because the things on that second channel, you can't unsee the level of anti-Blackness and statements that came out of her mouth, and it made me very, very sad. But yes, we did do a video on Patreon on that. All right, so if you missed it, this happened this week and was in the news that Uber's diversity chief, so chief diversity officer, the CDO, she was put on a leave of absence this week because she decided to host two, not one, but two specific workshops and sessions, all company-wide, to hold a safe space for white women who feel aggressed by being called Karen. Lord. And honestly, I'm not even gonna lie. When I first saw the headline, I laughed. And I was like, somebody in tech would think that this is appropriate. Tech is a very tone deaf place. And it was very interesting to me. And I think we've talked about this. I don't know if we talked about this on YouTube, but we've definitely talked about this on Instagram, which is there is a very short reel that is a snippet of a longer live stream I did. So all of the Instagram live streams, if you miss them, don't worry. They are available on Patreon for every single tier, starting at $2. So quite affordable. And the snippet essentially said that a lot of your favorite Black girlies in tech are selling you a dream. They're not telling you the truth. And as a former Black girl in tech, it was not enjoyable. And yes, I had to fight for my salary tooth and nail, and being the one and only in the room was uncomfortable. And people still asking to touch your hair when they are allegedly leftist liberal living in New York City is a jarring, irritating experience. So I was not surprised to hear that Uber was holding a Karen conference. Truthfully, I was, however, surprised that not only did the chief diversity officer double down on deciding to hold these workshops, that she stated that she wanted to create this safe space for problematic people. The only people, and I'm going to say this from the beginning, if it doesn't apply, let it fly. The only people ever upset with the word Karen are Karens themselves. I have never met a decent, law-abiding, kind white woman that cares about equity, that actually gets mad about the word Karen. The only people I ever see flustered are people know that they're doing foolishness and nonsense. So specifically, what this workshop was supposed to be about, so this is from the New York Times, employees' concerns centered on a pair of events. She held, mind you, not one, but two of these events. Oh, God. One last month and another last Wednesday that were billed as, and quote, diving into the spectrum of the American white woman's experience. The fact that somebody wrote this out, sent this as a meeting agenda, and sent this all company-wide, flabbergasting. So many levels of just wild caucasity. And hearing from white women who worked at Uber with a focus on the Karen persona, they were intended to be an open and honest conversation about race, according to the invitation. And I wanted to be known from the beginning of this that in the United States and across the world, I would say to varying levels due to colonization, but particularly in the United States, we know a lot about the persona of white womanhood. We have been force-fed white womanhood. We have been forced to assimilate into white womanhood as close as possible, because as a Black person, you can never assimilate into being white. It doesn't work. It's not possible for you. Even if you go the Sammy Sosa route, which is unfortunate, it's not going to happen, boo. We have seen Gone with the Wind version of Southern white womanhood, holding on to her land that is not hers and waiting for her man. We have seen Miss Congeniality version of white womanhood, which I really do like Sandra Bullock, a white woman that's edgy, a white woman that can both be cute, sassy, and doing law enforcement. We have seen The Notebook over and over again ad nauseum. White womanhood in love, white womanhood being chased after by two different white men. We are all quite familiar with white womanhood. I don't think Uber needed a panel to educate we the Negroes, the Latinos, Asian people, everyone else about what it's like to be a white woman. We all know what it is like, because we have to know in order to deal with when white women decide to exercise what they believe are their certain rights. All right, so diversity, equity, and failure. It should be noted, and I think the irony of some of these things is there's diversity, equity, inclusion, which diversity and equity and inclusion is largely frameworks used in corporate America. Diversity, equity, inclusion cannot and does not work without anti-racism work. Diversity, equity, inclusion is not anti-racism work. There is, however, people who use the words diversity, equity, inclusion, etc., like Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida, and use that as a euphemism for Black history. That is two different things. That is not what we're talking about. Ron DeSantis is a fool. Ron DeSantis is a bigot. Ron DeSantis is an aspiring Floridian fascist, in my opinion. humbly. That is using words like CRT, acronyms like CRT and DEI to essentially literally erase Black history from the Florida school books. We are talking about regular, degular, ho humdrum. Let us all put the different color hands next to each other. Diversity and inclusion that everyone has to attend one seminar at your new corporate workplace. And it doesn't work largely. It is a farce. And to quote myself from what we've had multiple conversations about this, to be honest. DEI frameworks are built to make white people in corporate feel like they're doing something. That's literally all it is. It is built so people who are not necessarily a full blown Karen, and maybe, they just want to ask inappropriate but seemingly innocent questions, feel a little bit better that yes, they understood the DEI training. And yes, they think, you know what, I need to think about my actions before I do them, but I'm still going to say this insensitive thing to you. And maybe I will just compliment your hair, but I'm not going to automatically reach for it. That's all DEI in corporate does. Truthfully. And it should be noted, and one of the things I realized, because we're going to get into my time as a diversity, equity, and inclusion manager in tech, that the majority of Black people in the United States do not work in corporate. They do not work anywhere near corporate. We are very much the people of a good government job. And that's largely because we've been systemically kept out of jobs that are high paying, such as jobs in corporate, kept out of corporate workspaces, except as the office manager, which is the new age version of the secretary, is very similar work, and kept out a lot of these roles. And the reason why this is important, because it very much informs why these frameworks never work, because they're never built for Black people. They're never built to actually make anything equitable and to actually do more recruitment of Black people in a corporate workspace. Instead, they're built for these very, very extremely, particularly for talking in tech, very white spaces where the employees overwhelmingly, I've worked at tech companies where I've been one of two Black people. Gabriel has worked, my boyfriend, at a tech company where he was the only Black person. And yes, there was more than 100 people in the company. None of these spaces and none of these programs have ever been better than a la 2020, when people decided that posting a Black square on Instagram was doing something for Black people. And the stats I found very interesting. So let's look at the stats for a second. So these are from NBC. Also, I don't know who wrote the article, but I got a little bit giggle about all the stats are like the Blacks. And I'm like, I don't know if we agreed to this, but okay. So study African Americans remain marginalized in corporate America, with Blacks making up 10% of college graduates. You would think there would be 50 Black CEOs, but they are only 4. If we're talking about proportions. So, for example, college degree holders, and this from 2019, the numbers now are probably larger, because it should always be noted that currently in the United States of this America, the largest and most educated demographic in the United States is Black women. We are getting the most college degrees, which I'm very happy for us. And however, we are also carrying the largest student loan burden to do so. So you can't talk about one without talking about the other, to be honest. So if we are holistically 10% of college degree holders, of that 10%, only 8% of said college degree holders work in quote unquote what they're considering white collar professional jobs, with only 3.2% then being executive senior level officers or managers. I've been the associate general counsel at one company, so I guess that somewhat counts, which is interesting. And then you have of Fortune 500 CEOs, 0.8%, which works out to about, at the time of this article, 4 Black CEOs in Fortune 500 companies. So if diversity, equity, inclusion ever were actually to tackle what is systemic enforced poverty in this country, what is systemic racism in this country, it would actually look at how are people in government jobs treated? How are people, working class people, treated? My dad, I've said a million times, is a truck driver. They don't got no DEI for trucking contractors. That they do not care. They do not care how they treat people. The amount of times, he's not going back, so I could say this. The amount of time his dispatcher, which is the person who tells you where you're driving to, has said blatantly racist things to him over his 40 plus year career. 30 plus? I'm like, how old is this man? 30 plus year career. I'm like, how old am I? How old is he? 30 plus year career. They're not actually focusing on making the majority of Black people's lives better. Diversity, equity, inclusion instead is so corporations can appear to be more progressive so they then can keep their consumers. That's all it is, sadly. It could be so much more, but it's not currently. So, some key findings of the report, which I found very interesting, specifically, on average, 58% of Blacks, I don't know why it doesn't say Black people, indicated they feel racism on their job, with the Midwest having the highest percentage at 79%, and the Northeast the lowest at 44%. What is going on in the Midwest? That's wild. I I would be very curious, and I wonder if because the Midwest is more homogeneous. I'm like, I know how to say homogeneous than the Northeast. The Northeast is accounting for New York. New York is technically one of, if not the most diverse cities, New York City in the United States. New York City is, however, very segregated, which people never want to admit that fact. And then they point to gentrification as if gentrification is helping. I'm like, this is exacerbating the issue and also pushing people out of their homes. Okay. So, with that being stated, one of the things and why diversity, equity, inclusion does not work, and why I can say with a straight face it was never built to actually uplift and help Black people is because the number of chief diversity officers, which are the people who run the DEI programs in corporate, the majority of them are white. Specifically, according to Zippia, 76.1% of CDOs are white people. How? Of course, we are having Karen conference, if this is what it is. Then you have 7.8% being Hispanic or Latino. I think it should be noted here when we're looking at Hispanic or Latino, one of the things that these studies never do is because that would be like a much more nuanced conversation to have is most of the chief diversity officers that I've seen that are Latina are in fact white Latinas. They are very rarely an indigenous Latina, a Latina that is brown, a Latina that is my complexion presenting, very, very rarely. Then you have 7.7% are Asian, and then only 3.8% of chief diversity officers are Black. Now, how are we going to get to equality baseline with this? We're not going to get to equity whatsoever with this. We are going to get to programs where people think, okay, we're just going to check the boxes. And as long as everyone is smiling, you know what? We're not going to take any of these complaints seriously. The amount of companies that I've worked at where I specifically, if you're quitting, you can write. If you're quitting or you get fired, you can write whatever you want in your exit interview. You're leaving. What does it matter? So I'm always very candid, extra candid in my exit interview. The amount of times I've written in my exit interview, list by list, verbatim, this happened, this happened, this happened, not just to me, other employees, these are statistics, this, that, and the next. This is the first time, always the HR person, this is the first time we're hearing this, Stephanie. Why didn't you tell me? And I was like, clearly your reading comprehension is low because I sent you these 3 emails where this, and this occurred. What is going on? What is going on? All right. Okay, let us continue this. And this is the root, one of the roots of the problem. So when I worked in diversity, equity, inclusion, we'll get into in a second. Afterwards, I made this video, which this is in the student loan playlist, if you go through the playlist for student loans. And I was like, oh, this is fitting. Let us play a little clip. Let me state this again for you as to the root of where I knew this was going to go left. One of the executives in the marketing department with no experience was put in charge of a brand new diversity, equity, inclusion function. What are we going to do? Market away racism? Most companies, when they think of diversity, equity, inclusion, it's a marketing tactic. The company I worked for, where I was, again, the first diversity, equity, inclusion hire, the person that they hired, that they didn't hire, they were already there. That was there to be my manager, had no DI experience. It did not go well. If you are new, to wrap up what happened in a span of 6 months, over the course of my career, I have built out 3 diversity, equity, inclusion programs for free as I was a tech attorney, various tech companies. So Series A, super small, some of them go belly up. That's been an experience, all the way to one publicly traded tech company. So I've worked at numerous, I think about 6 total. Definitely was a job hopper. I don't get my raise, I gotta go. It is what it is. So I built out before 2020 and the murders of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd. Corporate largely was like, oh, we don't gotta pay for that. Maybe, okay, I guess. And largely, they were not doing the work, particularly in tech. Tech, as much as tech touts itself as this progressive place, they didn't want to hire any diversity consultants. So I did the work for free because I want people to stop touching my damn hair at work. And also, in tech, people are saying crazy things to you. The amount of times I've went to meetings and people are like, when is the lawyer coming? And I'm like, well, I'm here and you're late and I'm annoyed. Let us go. Hurry up. The amount of times people just all types of harassment and foolishness at all times. So I built them out for free, including building a few employee resource groups, as well as attempting to educate people on their very explicit bias. The idea that bias is unconscious is laughable. And the people that came up with it are, what complexion? I don't believe in unconscious bias. After doing DI 6 months, I was like, oh, this is a term that y'all made to make yourself feel better. You knew what you did it on purpose, and actions have reactions. Consequences are good for everybody. So after doing that, this is now, let's take a trip down memory lane, December of 2021. I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to try YouTube full time, but I was doing diversity, equity, inclusion consulting as well on the side and working full time as a lawyer and doing YouTube. And I was like, you know what would happen if they got somebody in one of these roles that really is not afraid? Truthfully, I'm like, you know what? If you fire me, I'm a whole lawyer. I'll go get a new job. Like, I don't care. I'm going to say what I want to say and actually build in the anti-racism framework into the program. What would happen? So I took a job at this tech company. Now, mind you, who did they hire to be my manager? Someone who had spent their whole career in communications and marketing. Not a lick of sense regarding this. It did not go well. So those of y'all that have been here for a while already know this. It did not go well multiple times. Stephanie, you can't just focus on Black people, is what I was told. That is not what I did. It should be noted that in the company, the demographics that were marginalized were Black and Hispanic employees. That's who I focused all my energy on. The marginalized people, the people who are paid the least, the people who are treated the worst, the people who needed the help. They didn't like that. They didn't like that. Well, what about the white women? What about the white women? They seem to be doing fine. We need to work a little bit on the pay equity, but overall, they're doing better than everybody else. What about it? It should be noted in tech specifically, Asian women, often East Asian women, if we're being specific about it, because once you get into demographics of the Asian community, there are a lot of disparities that are often not discussed. So specifically, East Asian women with college degrees generally overall make more than white women and are almost and most of the time on par with white men. And Asian men, East Asian men actually make more than white men. So I was like, good for y'all. I'm happy for you. And let us focus on the things on, building out some solidarity and fixing the issues for the people who are constantly being aggressed and that have worked here, etc. amount of years and they don't make no money. Okay. It ended in a very fiery manner where after I did what I wanted to do for 6 months and was very honest with, hey, this is what you hired me for, and push back to the point where I was told, no, we can't talk about racism in these all hands meetings. It makes people uncomfortable. To which I was like, I don't know what I got hired for. So we're not going to mention it. It's going to magically go away. I got fired. Which, you know what? I expected. Either I'm going to get fired or I'm going to quit. It's either or is happening because I'm going to continue to do what I was mandated to do. These diversity, equity, inclusion programs are not built to actually do anti-racism work. They're not. They don't want that. They want a smiling, happy Negro, preferably light enough for their tolerance and with 3C, 3B-ish hair. The bigger my hair got, the more irritated they were. Like, oh, okay. Well, we still doing this. I'm like, we're still doing this because it still grew out of my head that way. And that's how it works. And it's nonsense and it's foolishness. And it wasn't just that one company. It's almost every place that I've worked at. And it should be noted that most of these places, particularly the diversity, equity, inclusion departments, are largely understaffed. You will have a chief diversity officer that has one person reporting to them. And then there's at that company, there were over 1,000 employees. What was a DEI team of two going to do? Very confused. All right, let us continue. Also, I think our guest is probably hopping in any second. Which actually is probably like a good point for them. We're going to go back. I'm going to go through some of the comments so that way when they hop in, and then we'll be on that. Listen, that's what you got to do. I love dragging people in my exit interviews. Mike V. DEI is meant to obfuscate accountability and historic grounding as to how it got so bad at the company that they didn't have the inclusion to begin with. Exactly. DEI, literally, they hire somebody in DEI, and why I was hired, mind you, in 2021. 2022, I started, actually, my start date. I did my interview process the end of 2021. Was because employees complained that 2020 happened, they did nothing. They posted their little square. They hired allegedly some consultant. They blamed the consultant, said the consultant did nothing. I found it very interesting that the consultant was a small Black woman business. I'm like, how convenient that y'all are blaming the consultant that you didn't give all the documentation to. How convenient. And so they then hired me in 2022, 2 years later, after every other major place in tech was like, okay, we have to at least have something. It's just meant to, like, see, look, we hired somebody. It's fine. We're listening and learning is corporate's favorite thing to say. They're neither listening nor learning. All right. Rocio, even a nonprofit that is supposed to assist candidates with DEI efforts had a white woman interviewing the potential candidates. I find it interesting when we talk specifically about this sector, diversity, equity, inclusion, the amount, if you get into the dollars and cents of it, I'm so used to looking here, so sorry. The dollars and cents of diversity, inclusion as a business. It is very much a business to these corporations, but it's also a business to people, where people, particularly the majority, 76% of people that work in diversity and inclusion are white, particularly white women. Use this as a career ladder into executive positions. They make a lot of money. White women already get paid more than other marginalized groups. Except Asian women, again, and that's East Asian. If we're looking at Southeast Asian, the numbers are a bit different. And particularly if we're looking at people like Robin DiAngelo, who wrote the book White Fragility, the amount that she commands for a speaking gig versus a Black woman who is literally saying the same content, doing the same things, has the lived experience, the research, apples and oranges. Robin is making 10 times more of them. And then it gets into the ethics of whether or not this white woman should now be famous, making all this money off of having common sense and being a decent person. Wouldn't it behoove people to instead listen to an actual marginalized voice? And it's the same thing with DEI. If you ask, because I've had colleagues that are white women in the space, some very well-meaning, some extremely tone deaf. I'm in confusion. How they got there. Worked in HR, not to say the quiet part out loud. A lot of failed actresses. And they're just now in diversity and inclusion, and they're racking up a coin. They learn the few buzzwords. They learn the difference between equality and equity. They show you the little fence meme, and they are running it. They're making $150K, living their best life. Doing what? What marginalized person was actually helped in the process of furthering the white woman's career? None, zero, nobody. All right. Let us continue with these comments real quick. Exactly, Sky W. But what's wrong with focusing on Black people? It's okay to focus on any demographic, but it's always a problem to focus on Black people. Exactly. It's always the quiet part out loud, which is particularly, we're going to get to, oh, here we go, me and this thing. So I have halfway figured out the camera. Hold on, I'm going to make this big and I'm going to remove me really quick, which is, I've been messing around with the camera and I kind of figured it out, but only halfway. Let's see. Did I get it? I think, wait, did I get it? Hold on. Me and this camera are living our own life at this point. Okay. Okay, cool. It's this, to be honest, because if we can have a whole basically conference in time dedicated to white women, why is everyone uncomfortable when it's for Black people? When again, the people marginalized in the original wrongs in this country is Indigenous people and Black people. But nobody wants to talk about it. And it's very, very strange behavior. Thank you, Stephen. Okay, let us continue. I think they're putting their kids down, so they are probably going to call in any second. Let me double check. Let me text them. Okay. Whenever you're Okay, perfect. All right, so let us continue. So, we're going to get into a little bit of the background of the history of people of color and why at certain points it was very well meaning because there was solidarity there. However, POC without solidarity is a pointless endeavor. So it has been, I would say, a growing trend since I want to say 2019, 2018-ish, where instead of saying Black, people will say POC. They are not interchangeable. That's not the same thing. People of color is supposed to allude to all, oh, now y'all are so close, all marginalized groups in the United States. So Black, Indigenous, Hispanic / Latino, depending which area of the country you're from, depends which word you like, and Asian. Supposed to all be included in POC. The Black experience is a very specific experience because of chattel slavery. The Black immigrant experience is included in that experience because Caribbean people are also victims of chattel slavery. And everyone, regardless of what type of Black you are going to get treated as a Black person. Okay. Whenever people started in corporate with the POC foolishness, to be honest, as a way to not say the word Black, because for some reason the word Black made them uncomfortable, had multiple times when I was a diversity inclusion manager where coworkers would literally whisper to me the word Black. So then I would just say back to them like louder, like Black, yes. Like clearly I'm Black. Like, why are you whispering Black to me? It's very strange behavior. To the point where I just took it upon myself. Whenever people said POC, I'm like, I'm not going to be uncomfortable. She's like, yes, I'm a Negro. I'm like, if you're going to be uncomfortable, if I'm going to be uncomfortable, then you're going to be uncomfortable. And now we're both just going to be uncomfortable because it's very strange behavior for when people want to use the word POC. What they're doing is they want a palatable person that is not quite Black, but is not quite white. That's what they mean when they say that now. And that brings back to the original problem, which is the chief diversity officer of Uber. And this is what she stated. So this is an excerpt from the New York Times, and this happened during the Karen conference a little bit after. And I think it's important to know in this story who decided to speak up and who decided to speak up for other people and the aggression and basically brush off that this person was met with. So several weeks after the first event, because there were 2 Karen events, a Black woman asked during an all Uber, all hands meeting how the company would prevent tone-deaf, offensive, and triggering conversations from becoming a part of its diversity initiatives. It should be noted, if you've never worked in tech is one of those spaces where all tech companies used to be startups. So Google at one point was in somebody's garage. Uber at one point was very small. If the 1% of them that actually scale and become unicorns, billion-dollar valuation and up, one of the things that tech holds on to always till the end, no matter how big they are, is this idea that startups very much believe in all hands where employees are allowed to push back. Now, having been an employee at WeWork when it was imploding the first time, all hands will get very spicy very quickly. However, the amount of courage it takes for you to stand up, raise your hand, and be like, I didn't like that. It is usually, when you watch an all hands, it is usually middle-aged white men that'll be like, what is this? I didn't like that. Why are you doing that? And then everyone else will cheer them on like, oh, thank you, Brad. I appreciated that. When we were at WeWork, that's what happened. A few people were like, so is this going under? What's happening? For a Black woman, and this is probably either she's in the office or she's on Zoom, it's the same concept because everyone's eyes on you. For a Black woman to put it on herself to stand up and be like, hey, y'all held 2 inclusive spaces and made us all attend so white women can literally cry about being called Karen, aka accountability, when they literally harm other people. This is problematic mess, is a huge thing. Is a huge feat of courage, and also risking the fact that the rest of your white counterparts are likely to side eye you and be like, oh, you're gonna do this during all hands? You just gonna, it's about y'all now, it's about Black people? Because the minute you try to advocate for anybody else, commotion happens. So I think that context is always needed, because when I worked, I did one job. Entertainment doesn't really do all hands like that. They do a little bit, but are like regular corporate, and regular corporate doesn't do all hands where you're allowed to say anything. So tech is a very different setup. So like that part should be noted, that the woman took it upon herself. And it also should be noted that the New York Times was one of the few articles that I read where they pointed out that a Black woman stood up and asked the question. So Miss Lee, this is the Chief Diversity Officer. She is a Korean American woman, which we'll get into in a second. Miss Lee fielded the question, arguing that the Moving Forward series, and mind you, Miss Lee titled the series "Don't Call Me Karen," which is a play off of Black women's initiatives, "Don't Call Me Sis," because calling a Black woman sis when you don't know her is wild behavior, is rude. It's like, I'm not sistering to you. Move. Appropriation always at all times, child. Was aimed at having tough conversations and not intended to be comfortable. And quote from Miss Lee, sometimes being pushed out of your own strategic ignorance is the right thing to do. Again, this is what the Chief Diversity Officer said to the Black woman. She said, according to notes taken by an employee who attended the event, the comment prompted more employee outrage and complaints to executives, according to the Slack messages and the employee. The idea that Lord. This Chief Diversity Officer said, you and your little willful ignorance wasn't meant to be comfortable in the first place. Is not only tone deaf for her to say that to any employee when they're literally saying like, hey, are we going to stop having callous, inappropriate conversations? But particularly for her to say that to a Black woman employee. If you are a Black woman in tech, that is a rough and lonely road. I don't give a damn what the girlies on TikTok were saying for the past 2 years. Most of them, unfortunately, have been let go. TikTok, child, that sounds like somebody was opening my door. TikTok, Google, Facebook, which is now Meta, Instagram, all of them have been cutting back. The girlies went on TikTok and were like, oh, this is the best thing ever. Everyone is so nice to me. I work 3 hours a day. It was always farce and malarkey. Always farce and malarkey. I've said this a million times. I didn't believe it. Yes, can you luck out and you end up on a really good team? Maybe by a miracle. Is that the norm? No, it was not. So again, for this woman, without bringing her race into it, which we'll talk about in a second, for this woman to tell us, oh, your strategic ignorance is tone deaf, but also shows a lack of understanding of Black history, of all the things that that woman had to do to even get the role at Uber, to work probably 5 times as hard to survive in what is known to be a very toxic workplace in tech. Tech is not all created equal. Certain companies, most of the Google employees I know at Google love Google. Most of my friends that have worked at Amazon, for example, Amazon corporate, they pay well. But oh my God, horror stories. Nothing but horror stories all day. Uber, similarly. For her to just be like, oh, your strategic ignorance toward these white women shows that people really not only don't care about the plight of Black people and corporate, but particularly with Black women, it's like, oh, well, you need to be kinder. To survive in a space that is not built for you, particularly to assuage the feelings of white women constantly when you work in tech, it would be laughable if it wasn't so harmful. And the exact word, exactly what I was going to say, is extreme amounts of gaslighting. All right. So I'm going to get through this part and then we are going to bring on our guest. So she's on leave now. So we'll see if she keeps her job. The Chief Diversity Officer of Uber, Bo Young Lee. And honestly, sorry to this woman. I think it is ironic and sad that some people use their status as, yes, a minority, but not Black, as a way to elevate themselves to talk over Black people. But also, the biggest irony of this is you stuck your neck out for these white women that put you up to this. And now the only person on the chopping block is Miss Bo Young Lee. Not the white woman who came to her and set up the idea that they demanded likely from her 2 workshops. I'm sure she didn't come up with this idea by herself in her office, like, oh, the white woman really needed. I highly doubt it, particularly during Asian American Pacific Islander month. I highly doubt it. I'm sure it was a slew of white women came to her office and was like, Bo, we need a conference for us because we are offended. And look who is in the problem. Look who's in the problem. Sticking your neck out for people who are committed to solely upholding white supremacy nonsense, which is what a Karen is committed to, will get you here. And I thought it was very interesting. I went on her LinkedIn, going through her LinkedIn, which is she has many years of experience as a chief diversity officer. However, if you look at her achievements as to what being a chief diversity officer means to her, this is all tied to money. Because again, diversity and inclusion without anti-racism work is largely a marketing tool. So particularly as a global diversity and inclusion practice leader, she has here generated over $3 million in revenue in the first year of the business and built a network of consultants and advisors to service over 24 client engagements. This is a marketing ploy, so that way you can say, hey, we care about those other people, keep buying our product, etc., etc. Insert stupid behind Pepsi commercial with Kendall Jenner. That's all this is. And then if you look at her experience here at Uber, Uber again is notoriously one of the worst places in tech to work. Created and supported a comprehensive anti-racism strategy. I don't believe it. How do you have a comprehensive anti-racism strategy, but you over here telling Black women they have strategic ignorance when dealing with white women? How? You can write anything, so I don't believe any of this. This is all farce and malarkey. Recognition achieved under my tenure. Best places to work for LGBTQ. Best places to work for people with disabilities. When you see best places to work, etc., the way that works is the people in HR will hound you. They know 2 weeks ahead of time. They're submitting New York, best places to work. They will hound you in your inbox. Hey guys, we're only at 70%. We need to get to 90%. You need to fill this out. You need to fill this out. That doesn't mean the place is good to work. I learned it the hard way. That just means they have a very dedicated HR team and they incentivize the employees to fill out the survey. That's it. That's all that means. And on that note, let me see what the next part is. I'll say this part and then we'll bring George on. So on that note, because when you have this conversation, people use it often as an either or. It's Black people and it's everybody else. When there has largely in history been solidarity, which is how we got the term people of color. Back when here you have Fred Hampton and the Rainbow Coalition. So the Rainbow Coalition was in Chicago. So you had Black people, poor, lower class white people, and Puerto Ricans as well. And that largely is people coming together. We cannot throw around the word POC if we're not acting in a way that is beneficial to everyone. If you're looking out for yourself, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. PO who? I'm a Negro and I'm going to mind my Negro business because this doesn't make any sense. Largely the people, when they want to push POC, they don't do shit for everybody else. They don't say, hey, I noticed that it's actually Black and Hispanic people being treated the worst. We should do something together. No. Well, we're all in this together, guys, but I need to be the face. And then you get a problem. We cannot all say that we're working on a group project when you come in at the 12th hour and then you take credit for the group project. It's not going to work. It's just not going to work because then when people call you out, it's all of a sudden strategic ignorance. So on that note, let us bring on our guest. All right, which I'm sure you're familiar with his channel.
Hey.
George, how are you?
Going down.
Thank you for coming so last minute. I appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me last minute. I've been wanting to do a collab, so I was like, look how the stars in the line this way. So
I know. I was reading the article today. I thought of you, so I'll introduce y'all to the channel. So this is George, Conscious Lee, as he's known on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. So he also does a lot of anti-racism work. So I thought it would be super helpful to get his perspective on, everything going on and, maybe a little bit hopefulness. Because you already know I worked in diversity, equity, inclusion, and DEI, in my opinion, doesn't work. Anti-racism work, however, it does work, but a lot of these corporations are not only hesitant, they refuse to actually implement things that make changes. So would love to hear your
Man,
thoughts.
I really been in the back, so I've been listening to a lot of things you said, and I'll be having a lot to say as well. So man, I ain't gonna try to take over the conversation too much. You feel me? I just think that I want to start off by saying an entry point. I have a master's degree in human relations, and the master's degree in human relations, the program was structured around DEI, diversity, inclusion, and equity, and just being an unapologetic Negro. It's going to be very clear. I'll be willing to debate anybody that the mere industry DEI was trying to make up for the shortcomings of the civil rights movement. And I think that there is a lot of slippage between how anti-blackness works and how these multicultural coalitions of people of color usually involved with distancing themselves from blackness and black people while simultaneously trying to get closer to whiteness and white folks. And I think that is a analysis when it comes to diversity, inclusion, and particularly people of color and how that's deployed. I feel like it's structured by anti-blackness. And then the last thing I'll say is Dr. Jared Sexton has an amazing article on this. It's called The Amalgamation Schemes. You feel me?
Let me write that down.
Check that out. You know what I'm saying? He got some fire analysis on there. You see what I'm saying? But yeah, education is elevation. And again, Stephanie, thank you for having me.
Of course. And I'm always curious, because you, I know you have a background in debate. So when you have these conversations with people, how do you go about proving them wrong? Because sometimes they're very dedicated to I'm the best representation of all of us non-white people. And it's like, how? You don't even know any Black history. This cannot work. So, but also getting them to realize that without centering Black people in the fight for rights for all of us, that is just, it's a waste of time.
Yeah, I'm always race to the middle in terms of intersectionality and think about the various ways that things impact folks, from class to race to ability to sexuality. But the balance part is, can you still be, very intentional with how you center in how systems and institutions and policies and practices be messing up with Black folks. So when I had these conversations, I usually think about how the other person is trying to say, hey, diversity is more than race.
I hate diversity of the mind is a very big thing.
Once I started hearing little dog whistles like that, I'm already know what I'm dealing with. And then at that point, I just want to maybe ask more questions to get, data to try to really figure out what is the stasis point I'm gonna use to meet you at where we agree here, don't we? You know what I mean? Ethics and morals, they matter, right? Yeah, and then get the other information and see just like, this is not what's going on. That's usually how I prove people wrong. But usually I'm gonna come at you with anti-blackness. Almost the question to be, can people of color be anti-black?
Yes, all the time, loud and proudly.
Yeah, and then another question to be, in your specific identity, can you tell me how colorism or anti-blackness operates uniquely? I don't give a damn whether you say that you Latino, you Asian, you indigenous. I don't care about any. Listen, colorism is something that permeates all cultures. Mm-hmm. And I know based off of your response to me about your analysis on colorism, it's going to tell me all I need to know about the term I use, racial literacy. Your ability to read and write race. You know what I'm saying? Your ability to read and write race. And Stephanie, like I know, folks be racially illiterate.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes I think people are dedicated to ignorance, to be honest. And I think partially why this article and I think it'll be interesting to see if she actually gets fired, the chief diversity officer. What I found really interesting was usually when these things happen, the scapegoat is somebody they're like, well, we were in a rush to hire. They don't have any experience, but she has almost 20 years of experience doing this. So it kind of shows that this specific version of DEI in corporate was never intended to work. And they just put these figureheads in these positions, you're like, well, there's somebody there. There's somebody there doing something, even if that something is very harmful.
Yeah, or that something is just propping up the status quo and a repackaged idea about progressivism or a repackaged idea about diversity. But in actuality, all you're doing is pushing tokenization and making sure we keep the comfort zone of whiteness and white folks untapped. Because I ain't gonna lie to you, reading that article is like, well, I think TikTok deserve a little 60-second little rendition of what's going on.
They do. Go do one. I mean, the clock app are opposed to each other.
Yeah, hey, listen. You know, like I know, man. All these apps be doing what they doing, how they do this, that, and the other. And this is what I know about being in the anti-black world, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of the different non-black people and non-black institutions, they pick their N-words and they stick to them. You know what I'm saying? And all it is you feel me, that's you, right? Hey, that it fits your ambiance, your aesthetics, the way in which you want to express your blackness. Them other ways, the way you want to express your blackness, like the clock out, it might not be that conducive. And I say that as somebody that want to cuss and fuss and learning that on the YouTube streets, hey man, you need to be.
Oh yeah, YouTube will demonetize you.
Much more strategic in how you're going to express yourself and not get too broad, unfiltered, because then they will definitely not only demonetize, they might hit you with a community guideline.
Listen, you can be, I would say I'm pretty unfiltered on YouTube, minus like the cussing. Like I don't cuss that much on YouTube.
Cussing,
yeah, that was like that was a corporate takeover for me. Like I was like, well, we did 6 years in corporate, so it's fine. I continue about my business, which is always really interesting. So if you're up to, and if you want to talk about it, the next section I was going to do was on white womanhood and the quest for victimhood, if you wanted to talk about that.
Yeah.
And particularly how this stemmed from, because I'm very much convinced that the chief diversity officer wasn't the originator of this thought. That they very much asked for this. However, she is now the scapegoat, rightfully so. This is what happens when you do foolishness for white supremacy. They don't look out for you anyway. There's a good lesson to learn. But I think it's really interesting, this idea of some people really trying to make the word Karen as if it's a slur. And I'm like, Karen is for accountability. You only get called a Karen when you are doing something harmful.
Hey, for me, shout out to, FD Signified. When I seen the video he made where he was talking about being intersectional with cisgender straight white men, I think that when we usually talk about intersectionality, we don't talk about white men like that. But I think that usually when we talk about white women in terms of intersectionality, we think about how power and domination is pushed against them. And we don't think intersectionally how they're able to push power against other people. You know what I'm saying? And for me, when I think about patriarchy from a very surface level in terms of like European Eurocentrism, hey, peep game. The white woman is positioned as being the most protected, the most things that we have to always already protect. Even in acknowledging benevolent sexism, I will acknowledge that, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Still in doing this, though, we can see that the barbecue Becky or permit Patty, that's them being able to mobilize white victimization for white women, trying to make sure there's going to be some type of white patriarchal policing to follow by. And I think that when you think about like second wave feminism or third wave feminism or black feminism and shit like that, it's like, hey, they are making critiques and criticisms uniquely about how white women are able to deploy this victimhood, to make it what a reality and what it is. Something that really took my brain and made me think like, damn, I didn't think about it like that. Is when I was reading Ida B. Wells. When I was reading Ida B. Wells in college and I'm reading about the anti-B lynching campaigns, you feel me? And she's talking about how, what she said, the political reality when it came to sexual violence was not the same as the social reality. And I just think that there's something that, that's, I think that it's, I feel like me and you have the range to have this conversation. You see?
Yeah, I think so. And I think particularly it made me laugh, and I should have screenshotted it. So the levels of entitlement, particularly that white women have when you don't center them, or if you center them in a negative light, is very interesting. So I did a video on Elizabeth Holmes, a notorious tech scammer. And so I was like, Elizabeth got away with this because she's a white woman. I was like, that Elizabeth raised more than $1 billion off of a thing, basically this biotechnology that never worked. Her professor told her it would never work. Raised $1 billion. Said, how did Elizabeth get $1 billion? Said, because she's a white woman. And I got a comment from this white woman that was like, why would you make this video to attack your core audience? So I wrote her back. I said, the nerve of you and the caucasity to think that you are my core audience. I said, ma'am, the core audience is Black women. Please move. And also the fact that you think this should center around you and that we shouldn't call out who is a known scammer. Very strange.
Hey, they say hit dogs holler. She was or howl. No, hit dogs howl.
Exactly. She was
Whatever.
very urged, but it made me realize that a lot of the new, even now, I would say like in the digital age of like white versions of feminism, it's always like, well, we're doing it for everyone, and it's everyone is after the fact. So like even the statistic, this is a government statistic, which government graphics are so ugly. And the statistic was overall women earn about 82 cents for every dollar men earned. Then Hispanic or Latina women earned 58 cents and Black women earned 63 cents for every dollar white men earned. Didn't mention Indigenous women, and then Asian women, East Asian women specifically earn almost on par with white men. But it was the fact that the overall, they're like, okay, so white women, and then the rest of yous over there. And white women largely internalize a lot of this rhetoric, I've noticed, like all the way through school, which is like, yeah, but if we do it for me, it will help y'all. And I'm like, it won't. You are already sitting on your privileged perch. Helping you is not helping me. Helping me would actually help you.
Hey, I try to say it in the most coolest, smoothest way, because I know me being a straight Black man that perform a certain level of masculinity, it can come off as being threatful. So I'm gonna say this, you feel me? But you acknowledge I have a debate background.
Mm-hmm.
Once I figured it out, I made a hell of a debate career being able to obliterate white feminist arguments, particularly when it comes to domination and power.
I'm curious about this.
I'm talking about. Listen, what? That's something that I feel like I had a knack for it almost. So when we talking about the social media streets and how different white women like to deploy, this would really itches my ass. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Very
individuals deploying a ideology that they think is just new, unique, and just like, man, you making the same arguments that Ida B. Wells was arguing against before I was even thought of, before my mama was
100 years ago, almost
100 years almost. You see what I'm saying? It's like you think that in 2023, you being able to talk about Karen's and centering how your discomfort and you being called a Karen, how that make you feel. Hey, them white woman right there said that, hey, the idea of anybody being able to vote before me is crazy.
Susan B. Anthony said she would cut off her right arm before she let the Negro vote before her. And people hate whenever you say, oh, you're focusing on the wrong things. And I'm like, no. We're focusing on the right things.
Or like this. How you brought me in though? How you brought me in? Let's center solidarity and coalitions. Mm-hmm. You a person that want to build solidarity. I'm a person that want to build solidarity. You a person want to build coalitions. I want to build coalitions. If we're thinking about what is the most efficient way to do that and what's the most respectful, ethical way to do that, we have to acknowledge what's getting in the way of us not being able to have that coalition. We have to acknowledge what's creating attention when we have dialogue. If you try to dictate how Black women or non-white women come to you and give you grievances, it's going to dictate how that coalition, how that solidarity happens. You see what I'm saying? And what I find is that a lot of white liberals, especially when they have something else to add, you feel me, to them being, oppressed, white liberals have a particular way of acting like they cornered the market on saying, hey, I'm against racism, while simultaneously ignoring how they implicated in racism. And for me, right? Mm-hmm. I feel like you've seen my video of me saying this before, but I'm an anti-sexist.
Yeah, I saw that one.
If you tell me, hey, George, you speaking over me, or George, I think that was patriarchal what you just said, I ain't gonna say, shut up, Stephanie. I read Ida B. Wells. How dare you call me sexist? I can tell you about, you see what I'm saying? There are, this conversation right now, that's what white women do. White women will literally tell you How dare you, black woman, try to call me racist? I watch Oprah. I've read Patricia Hill Collins.
Child.
Am I lying though?
Oh,
Am I lying?
no, it's so many conversations. It's interesting that you specifically said liberals because honestly, I've lived in New York 9 years. So born here, grew up in Miami. So officially a New Yorker now. It's been 9 years. And the majority of people in New York, particularly white people of all genders, would say that they're very liberal. The majority of them.
Yeah.
When you get to conversations, though, it becomes, yeah, of course I'm not racist, but there's always a but. But people need to pull up their pants when they're going places. The anti-blackness just creeping. But I understand why there are locks in all of the hair products because people are stealing. But blah blah blah. Oh yeah, me and this camera, I can't figure it out. I'm gonna ask you to help me later.
Oh, I was like, man, what's going on in mud?
Oh no, you're fine. I have to press it and then not press it again.
Oh, well, I thought I was tripping for a minute. Like,
no,
wait,
it's not you. It's me. Hold on, I'm gonna remove it.
My bad, though. Hey, shout out to y'all. This is a friendly reminder. This is just subscribe, like this video right here. Like it, comment, share it to a friend if you didn't count any jewel that come through. And then while you're doing that, go subscribe my page too. You know what I'm saying? Education is elevation, and this is just why the flow is mine. White women, this is not supposed to be an attack to you. This is not me targeting you. This is me thinking uniquely about how my experiences as a black man has given me knowledge in the books that I've read. It's been giving me insight to be able to speak truth to power. You see what I'm saying? Speaking truth to power is a saying that I think that a lot of people love to talk about, but it feels some different. It hit different when you don't want to recognize how sometimes you are the power you can be spoken to. You know what I'm saying? So again, listen, hit dogs holler. If the shoe does not fit, then don't wear it. See what I'm saying? If it don't apply, let it fly. But I believe that politically, socially, economically, what me and Stephanie getting in terms of how white women are uniquely positioned and how that position can lead to like parasitic, not only gender violence, not only racial violence, not only like, cis sexism violence. I feel like it damn near makes it where the same ops you trying to come to us and see like, hey, I'm against the man too. You do things that perpetuates the power of the man. Or you do things that literally makes it where the only knee-jerk reaction is for the man to come in and be like, you attacking white women?
Mm-hmm. That behavior reinforces the caste system that we have in the United States, which is, yeah, maybe I want to help you, but I want to help me first because I'm up here because I'm white, bright, and light. And I want all of these things. And you know what? You can't have them. You cannot have them. And I think particularly whenever I have these conversations, and I always tell people, like, you have to decenter your personal feelings. But particularly with that is accountability will not kill you. It is okay if you do something wrong. Somebody's like, no, it's racist what you did. I didn't like it. This is why it was inappropriate. You are not justified in then crying because you're so shocked that you're capable of being hurtful. It's okay. You have to apologize, put your big girl panties on, and fix the situation. But you cannot then have a breakdown because I think particularly what I found so egregious about not only Uber having one, but 2 events literally said, don't call me Karen, is complete erasure of the fact that all of the people that have been called Karen, the things that they did, the Karen in Central Park, her calling the police, literally calling the police on the poor man that was just literally bird watching, can get people killed and have gotten people killed historically in the actual violence that white women tears have.
Yeah. I think that ain't no fun when a rabbit got the gun. And it's easy to say you against oppression, but it's harder for you to be kind of have that energy when you recognize you implicated in it. And I think that the way in which white women, particular white women that feel like, Karen is the same as saying the N-word or something like that, it's like you realize that like the person that got Emmett Till killed was a Karen. So don't think that what's happening to you is something that's new. And you know what the last thing I say is, the internet has made it where a lot of things that we've been doing and been seeing in the black community has now seeped into the mainstream. It's like, hey, people ain't caring. We was calling Karen back in the early 2000s.
I was like, they've been Karen to us. Y'all just now know that we're calling you Karen.
You just now know about it. You see what I'm saying? Just like hey, all black people know that you call us the N-word when we're not around. We know that you say the N-word in the rap songs that you like. We know that you even slip up and call a black person the N-word in private. You feel me? And you do it in a way where you feel like, man, I hope that nobody hears that one, because you know you should have said it that way. We know. You see what I'm saying? But we don't act surprised. You know, I don't act surprised, and Stephanie don't act surprised when, you know, dogs bark and 2 + 2 = 4. Like, you know, like we don't be surprised. So with that being said, when you get called a Karen, it's like, hey, P game, there is a particular history that cannot be denied, regardless of how you feel. You calling the police on black people for not having permits?
You calling the police on little black kids trying to sell lemonade? You deserve to spend the night in the chokey so you could think about what you did. You calling the police on little black girls trying to sell lemonade. You need to think about what you did. Consequences.
Consequences, repercussions. And then I know for me, talking about racial progression, I mean, if you're talking about racial progression uniquely on TikTok, man, I'm going to hear about affirmative action every day of the week. See what I'm saying? And even if I can account for the over sensationalizing to say that, you know, only white women X, Y, and Z, it's AP game, man. White people benefited more from affirmative action than black people. That's a fact.
Mm-hmm. Everybody except Abby. Abby with the bad grades. Abigail.
Well, ever since, Abigail Fisher, man. Shout out to you, Abigail Fisher.
Shout out to Abigail Fisher becoming the biggest villain there is. And I think that's actually, I did a video on Patreon about that, on affirmative action, because people are largely like, look at Asian people are supporting that. And I was like, no, I was like, the majority of Asian people are actually protesting against this. However, when you dig into the case, the people that have put up paid for this litigation is not cheap. People that have paid for litigation. It's Abigail Fisher's godfather, who's a notorious racist. Abigail Fisher was picked from the beginning to be the scapegoat for affirmative action when she didn't get into UT. Imagine your family members dislike you that much. They're like, here, girl, we know you're dunce. Come, make you the face of this.
Hey, awful. Man. All FBL need to do is step her whiteness up. You feel me? You can't get mad that you're a mediocre white person. You know what I'm saying? You're a mediocre white woman, and instead of you stepping up your mediocrity, you decided to project it on the black folks. The thing about affirmative action is it'd be like, you know, statistically, we have 5% of black folks that got in, and your idea is like those black people that got in, that 5% of the 95% of the class, they should not be there. So instead of you thinking about the bottom of the barrel white person that got in because their dad was able to buy a building or give some endowment money, you ain't tripping on them. You go after the black person because you just know your presence is more rightful in that space than theirs. So you go after that. Very telling, very telling, very telling, man. But you had the hood feminism up there. I did not want to stop that.
No, you're totally fine.
Whatever point you had, bring that back. You didn't scratch part of my debate. You feel me? Like when I was at the debate, we did hip hop feminism. We did, you feel me, like a hip hop pedagogy. Like
Listen, I would highly recommend. So I started reading this. It's actually right here. It's been on my list for so long. So I'm like, okay, I'm finally reading it. So I'm halfway through it. And it's always so refreshing to read something from somebody and be like, yes, agreed. Yep, that was the experience. And I really highly recommend Hood Feminism by Mickey Kendall for numerous reasons, but particularly because the way that she talks about feminism is similar to Bell Hooks in that feminism is supposed to be all-encompassing, but she does a great job and takes it a bit further in making it very much the practical day-to-day, which is like something that would be, I would say, for Black people so top of mind, like food insecurity. Living in a food desert is not looked at as a feminist issue, even though the highest demographic of people that face food insecurity are women and children. But if you ask a white woman about food insecurity, they're like, oh, the starving kids in Africa. I'm like, the starving kids down the street?
Yeah.
The starving kids that go to school with your kids? And it's just, I was like, the reality is just missing people. The reality, I'm like, we have to have some conversations about what type of reality do you live in? Because if 51% of white women voted for Donald Trump, Sweetie, Donald was over here not going to do anything good for you.
Hey, Susan B. Anthony said what she said, and you still see that mantra. You know what I'm saying? It continues to live on. But you know, shout out to young 19-year-old me. Young 19-year-old me came across When Chicken Heads Come Home to Roost. Hip
Oh,
Hop
yes.
Criticism by John Morgan.
Mhm.
And yeah, you feel me? If you wanna you know, get a little more something like hood feminism, you check out this When Chicken Heads Come Home to Roost. It's definitely a good one, man. It's definitely a good one. And with that being said, because as a black man, to the other black men that might see this, when you bring up your criticisms of feminism, and you bring up the surface level arguments that the black feminists said 50 years ago, 60 years ago, 70 years ago, you're not as clever as you think you are. See what I'm saying? And a lot of these surface level, black women, the feminism is what broke down the black home and feminism started. Those ideas, those are white supremacist speaking points that you got from your master and P. Game. They're not as clever as you think they are. Black women were already making better arguments speaking to those issues in the 1960s, the 1970s, goddamn the 1920s. I'll rest my eyes. I'm gonna put it out there.
It sounds better coming from you. They're more likely to receive it. So I appreciate that, because the Moynihan report is just having some of the men's in a chokehold. And I just don't understand. Speaking again of white liberals, if you read the introduction to the report, you would think this is a very well-meaning white man who cares about black people. And next thing you hear, you know what? It's these Negroes' fault they're like this because they don't have no family. It's like, what? Structural racism, chattel slavery, rampant discrimination, Jim Crow. No. That's not the issue.
Yeah. And then
and to hear black men repeat it over and over again, I'm just like, what is it? It stresses me out.
Hey, listen. Imagine, Stephen. I'm gonna tell you about misandry and the discrimination against men, and I'm gonna follow that mug up with a Moynihan statistic.
I feel like MLK just rolling in his grave, like, these were the centrists I was talking about. What is happening?
Hey, listen. When Martin Luther King says, hey, black people, the Negro, hey, our greatest stumbling block is not the Ku Klux Klan, it's the white moderate. Hey, listen, the person that Moynihan was a white moderate. The book, the book, it's like a little journal, you know what I'm saying? It was dense, ain't no cap, it was dense. I had to read a couple of times to really comprehend what was going on. But Horton Spiller's Mama's Baby, Papa's Maybe, I think is what it's called. Mama's Baby, Papa's Maybe by Horton Spillers. She got a damn good critique about Horton's about that Moynihan report and how the Moynihan report uniquely was able to damn near dictate how policy, access, and opportunity, you feel me, like really what happened from 1960s damn near to now, you know what I'm saying? Even though the piece I think was published in like the 80s, I think, you know what I'm saying? But definitely something you should check out, man. Something you should check out, you know, and chew on it.
Listen, I appreciate you. I know it's getting late over there and it's late over here. So thank you so much for coming on the channel. We're gonna have to do this again.
Hell yeah, we gotta do it again. We gotta do it again. I'm gonna text you. I got some ideas.
Okay, cool. I have some ideas too. So I'm gonna you want to wait. I'm gonna close it out and then we can just chat on here. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna remove you. So thank you, George. I will put the Patreon link in here too. George, do you have Patreon as well? Do you want me to put your
I got Patreon. Remember I told you I was having an issue with them. They finally got it cleared up with
me. They got it. Okay.
I'm about to be back on Patreon going crazy. You know what I'm saying? I had my old university email that was attached to the Patreon. I no longer work for the university. You know what I'm saying? So I couldn't log on to Patreon on my laptop. So I had to like go back and forth with them with security issues. Shout out to Patreon though, because y'all got some top-notch security over there, goddamn. Y'all was not playing
top flight security in the world.
Stuff. Hey, what? They was not playing with my own stuff, man. But I appreciate y'all for protecting, you know what I'm saying? You know what I mean?
What's your Patreon under? I'm just looking for it really quick and I'm gonna put it unless I can't spell. Hold on, that's likely.
Consciously, same thing. Or consciously, it should be the consciously. You know what I'm saying?
Why can't I find you? Patreon. Let me see. Let's Google. Okay, cool. Okay, I found you now. I don't know why I didn't pop up in the search button. Okay, cool.
Probably because Patreon is like, we're not going to get this man be any more search and discovery because he has not posted in about 2 years.
Okay, well, you have to make a post because I just put it here, and then people will be like,
hey, my editor, listen, people at Patreon and people that's interested in maybe subscribing to our Patreon, I have some amazing exclusive content that I've been working on. You feel me? That's going to only be available on Patreon. As a matter of fact, I got a video that might be uploaded when we get off here because it's already done, right? But thank you.
You're welcome. Well, thank you for coming on here. So I'll log off in like 2 seconds. So I'm just gonna put you. I'm gonna remove you real quick. All right. Thank you. All right. Well, I appreciate y'all, and we got through all of our slides. So I'm hoping that we're gonna get back to our weekly lives. I miss our weekly lives. Honestly, I was trying to figure out the algorithm. It has some changes. So last month's lives, it didn't show anybody then. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to start to do weekly lives like this again. And I'm probably going to have a guest on. So whatever topic of the week. So let me know. You can always send them on here or on Instagram. Speaking of Instagram, we're going to do a live tomorrow because I specifically want to talk about Lord Danbury. Why does Lord Danbury and Queen Charlotte look like that? And we need to discuss Shonda Rhimes. Because as somebody who loves period pieces, when the man immediately came onto the screen, I was like, oh, what in the minstrel show is this? I don't know who did Lord Danbury's hair and makeup, but I have a lot of questions. And I looked up the real actor, and he doesn't look like that. So we're going to talk about that tomorrow on Instagram. If you missed that on the Instagram Live, it'll on Patreon for all the tiers. And we're going to do a weekly live like this. I think either Tuesdays or Wednesday. And then if the algorithm's being weird, we'll keep them on here for like a day, and then I'll put them on Patreon. So that way y'all can see them. But yes, so I appreciate y'all, and I will see y'all probably like tomorrow afternoon for Instagram for a little like messy, but kind of questioning. But also let's talk about period pieces and why does Lord Danbury look like this? Because Queen Charlotte was a great show. Not historical at all, but I have questions. Okay. Well, I appreciate y'all, and I will see y'all later. Have a wonderful night. Bye.